Hey yo, what is up? Ob.780 is upon us, and it is already on the live server. For those of you guys who don't know, this tank actually came out, news started coming out about this tank 2 years ago. In fact, we had a preview of this tank sometime 2 years ago, but now it is finally here. And the reason is because we know this, a bunch of super testers have been testing it on the live server over the last 2 weeks. And now some of you might not know this, but this tank actually had some of its specifications changed. The last time it was changed was May 19th, and that's about 2.5 weeks ago. And it's been released to the super testers on the live server, and they've been running around and playing with this tank for about 2 weeks now. We're going to go over the stats, and we're going to talk about what you can expect from this tank, and how it's going to perform and so forth. But first of all, let's appreciate the look of this tank to begin with. Super sexy looking, this tank. If you pay attention, it has a lot of sharp angles. It has a turret shaped like an egg. A lot of angles. This means the potential to bounce high penetration shells would be very good on this tank. If you take a look at the how the shells could be bouncing off the front, bouncing off the side, bouncing off the side of the turret, it is just going to be insane. The shells are just going to fly everywhere, and possibly not even penetrate this turret and this hull. But yeah, let's take a look at the stats, and we'll talk about this a little bit further. Like I said, the stats have been changed for 2.5 weeks now. The stock penetration on this gun is 267 millimeters of penetration, which is about the same as a Ob.780 or Chieftain T95. A Chieftain is of course highest penetration, 270. The 277 has a stock penetration of 265 millimeters, but the premium penetration is somewhat disappointing. Even though they've improved it from 305 penetration, it is now 311 penetration, 311 millimeters of penetration. But compared to an Ob.277, Ob.277 has 340 penetration, and if I'm not mistaken, the Chieftain has 322 penetration. So this is where it's going to lose out to the Ob.277 and Chieftain T95. But yeah, let's admire again how sexy this tank looks. It actually looks pretty amazing. But again, the disappointment is in the premium shell penetration, only 311. That is a bit of a downer there. However, it makes up for it in the alpha damage. This tank packs a 530 alpha gun. Ob.277, of course, 490, and the Chieftain 440. 530 damage is huge, but the problem is the reload time is going to be somewhat slow, 13.71 versus the 277 is 11.98 or 12 seconds, and the Chieftain 10 seconds. So extra 40 alpha damage, but reload time slower by 3 seconds, 3.5, 4 seconds. So that is the downside of the reload time, and the alpha is where you make it up. But I must admit, this tank is really good looking. If you notice the markings on the tank, this was when it first came up, people thought it was going to be a 10th anniversary because it had all the markings of a 10th anniversary tank. Everyone thought it was going to be a gift or some kind of tank that you can get from a reward, but it wasn't to be. And 2 years later, now that they're releasing it pretty soon, I suppose, does it have anything to do with ranked reward? Does it have anything to do with battle pass? We'll find out, I guess, soon. Among other things that was buffed on this tank was the aim time. It was slated to be, what was the aim time? It was going to be 1.92 seconds, and then they buffed it to 1.82, which means significantly better than an Ob.780, which has a 2.59 seconds aim time, and the Chieftain, which has a 2.01 seconds aim time. The dispersion, very much similar to the Chieftain, 0.34 dispersion. It was supposed to be a lot worse. Initially, it was supposed to be 0.35, but they decided to make it 0.34. But more importantly, the moving dispersion is now 0.11. Just for reference, Ob.780 is 0.16, while the Chieftain is 0.14, which means we are talking about pretty good gun handling here, pretty good dispersion, pretty good aim time, and pretty good moving dispersions, which means technically you can play this tank without any vertical stabilizers. If you're going to take it out to clan events, clan wars, you are possibly talking about running it with a hardening to improve the hit points, with turbo to improve the mobility, and with rammer to improve the reload time, just like what you would do in Clan Wars Chieftain and Clan Wars Ob.277. Obviously, if you have field modifications in this tank, you can run a secondary setup, one for your random battles and one for Clan Wars. But yeah, let's take a look next at the armor profile before we talk about anything else, which is pretty interesting in this tank. Here is what you would expect when you are coming face to face with the Ob.780. If you have stock penetration of 267, man, you have 10% chance of penetrating the lower plate at this angle, automatic ricochet on the top plate, and on the side plate where the 3/4 panel is, man, there is a 9% chance that you can penetrate them, man, almost no chance. And the only visible weak spot that you have is actually the cupola, which you can definitely penetrate with 267 penetration. But let's say we have 311 penetration, then your chances of penetrating the lower plate is slightly better. You have 30% chance now of getting the lower plate, and the 3/4 angle here, 70% chance here, and your chances get a bit worse as you shoot the back of the 3/4 panel. Man, this tank is going to be very interesting. Now imagine if you are face to face with it. With 311 penetration, you have 80% chance of penetrating the lower plate. But as usual, when you're driving a tank with a cupola that is easily penetratable, what you normally do to defend yourself is raise your gun up and protect your cupola and wiggle it like that. Sometimes you can block your enemies from shooting your weak point, and if you use your gun to block your cupola, man, it's really difficult for you to shoot the cupola here. And if you have stock penetration, man, it's going to be even more difficult. Imagine your enemy blocking the cupola. You don't have a cupola to shoot, and the lower plate, you only have less than 50% chance to penetrate the lower plate with 267 penetration, and everything else is automatic bounce and ricochet. Man, this is a difficult tank, quite interesting to fight against. Imagine this guy, side scraping this way. You with stock shells, man, not being able to penetrate anything. And if he decides to use his gun to block the cupola that way, man, what are you gonna do? You're not gonna be able to penetrate anything, and then he's just gonna aim and kill you very quickly. But anyway, let's go back to the stats of this tank again. We can talk a little bit about the forward speed. It was changed from 50 kilometers an hour, nerfed to 45 kilometers an hour just as well. This tank, you don't want it to be too fast. It has already pretty good power to weight ratio of what is the power to weight ratio again? It is 17.47 power to weight ratio, and it is a much lighter tank. Chieftain is 60 tons, this is 49 tons, but it does have lower engine power, which is 870 horsepower, which means I'm expecting the mobility to be similar to a 277 or a Chieftain, and that is what I'm expecting about this tank. But other than that, turret armor 300 frontally, 300 millimeters, 200 on the side, but with all that sloping, you're just going to be, if they're going to shoot you here, you're just going to bounce this. If they shoot you from the front, you're just going to bounce this. If they shoot your upper plate, you're going to bounce this. Man, this tank, it's going to be very, very interesting, because it's going to be very good tank to ricochet shells, I would imagine. Very good tank for blocking damage. That is what I'm expecting out of this tank. So that is what I have, all the news that I have for you about the Ob.780, which is due to be released soon, I would assume, because it is already out on the live server, being played by the Supertesters in EU, and a very sexy looking tank. It looks like this tank has got amazing armor. The gun performance maybe not that incredible because of that 311 millimeters of penetration on its premium shells, but that is the only kind of weak spot, I could say. By the way, both the shells have very high velocity, over 1100 meters per second shell velocity. So both shells, the premium shells and the standard AP shells, are going to be very high velocity shells, but not very high penetrating. Maybe not suitable for clan wars, but it's going to be fine for random battles. So that's all the news I have for you today. Expect the 780 to come out pretty soon, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.